there's more and more research coming out that is suggesting at least that insects might feel pain.
Honestly, it's a real joy to be speaking with you today. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much for the time. I really do appreciate it.
Not a problem. No, it's great to be talking to you. Always nice to be talking bugs. I enjoy doing it.
Well, I'm excited to chat with you about bugs because this series makes you want to do that. And we're just talking, of course, with Dr. Tim Cockerill, the entomologist and series advisor to A Real Bug's Life on Disney Plus, which is just honestly, I can't believe how much I enjoyed the series. Um, there's so much life to it. But how did you come to be involved?
Yeah, it's an interesting question and great that you enjoyed it so much. It's that I've kind of unconsciously become qualified strangely for this job of being professional insect wrangler, which when I set off in my embarking into the world of kind of insects and being involved with that, I never imagined that that's what I would end up doing, being an insect wrangler. So I'm a scientist by training, and so it all started off many years ago in a suburban back garden in East Yorkshire, where I just go out into the garden and look at bugs in the garden, and then I started to study them in a more formal way, and started to be a bug scientist essentially. So I have a PhD in insect ecology. And then when I was doing my PhD, I was working in rainforests. And so then started to do a lot of talking about insects, all of these incredible insects that we find in tropical rainforests. And then through talking about them in public, then I started to get involved in TV. And TV companies started phoning up and saying, we want to make a film about bugs. Have you got any ideas? What should we film and what's feasible to do and how should we make them? How can we get bugs to do this complex behavior right in front of in front of our cameras? And how can we tell those stories using all this technology? So it's a kind of strange, long, and convoluted route to being a professional bug wrangler.
When we think about insects, usually they're the quote bad guys. And
Mm.
I say that just in our general day lives, people see them as an inconvenience, but this show has such an enthusiasm for them. I can see that you do. What excites you most about the world of insects?
Well, when it comes to the world of insects, insects really are, we describe them sometimes as the smaller majority. And I have this theory that we treat insects in a particular way purely because of their size and not
Mm.
because of any of their other attributes. And when we look at things through the kind of cold, hard light of science, well, we realize that actually the insect world is the normal way to be an animal on planet Earth. Right. So if you think about animals, the complex living things on planet Earth, the vast majority of animal species are actually insects. And so we
Mm.
always think of insects, bugs, as being the strange ones and doing weird things and living their lives in weird ways. But the more we pay attention to studying the natural world, well, we realize that actually we're the ones that are weird. We're the strange examples. And not just humans, of course, but the groups that we belong to, the mammals and vertebrates more broadly, that we're actually the strange ones. And in fact, if you want to
Mm.
take a typical example of an animal, it's the insects. And there are statistics like, for example, if you add together all of the different species of all of the other animals basically, so all of the mammals and birds and reptiles, amphibians, fishes, all of the kind of soft and squidgy things, the worms and the mollusks. You can throw in plants there, you can add in mushrooms, all the fungi as well. All of those species combined still don't come close to the number of species of insects that exist on planet
Mm.
Earth. And that works for the number of individuals as well as the number of species. So not only are there more different types of insects than everything else put together, there are more individual insects on planet Earth than everything else put together as well. So really, when we start to look at these things, the question not becomes why should we become interested in insects? The question is why should we bother looking at anything else?
I mean, it's a great point. It's funny. It's funny seeing this series because it really is through the eyes of these different insects. Speaking with Bill Markham, I noted that the villains, if we use that word, to
Mm.
use that word in this series are like the baby ducks. It's like these are
Yeah.
the terrifying creatures because we're rooting for everything in this film from the hermit crabs onward.
Mm.
Um, but in your mind, what does it take to mean to you to tell stories in the insect world? Because I think at one point in the series it says that this is a tale of how little creatures overcome giant odds.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the similar kind of thing, really, that the closer we look at these things, we realize that we are so used to telling those stories of those larger animals, those things that we've kind of evolved to associate with, and that we're a social creature and we're a social primate, and we like looking at other primates and other mammals and other vertebrates. So we basically like looking at other things with a face and with eyes and with things that have kind of those social groups that are similar to our own. And so it's actually quite a hard sell to TV companies generally to talk about insects, to get someone to commission a whole series about bugs. This is like a dream come true for us. But you realize again, as soon as you turn your attention to them, that all of those stories that we're used to seeing in those nature documentaries, the stories that happen in the life of a lion on the Serengeti or an orangutan in Borneo or a giant panda in China, all of those dramas, the quest to find somewhere to live, the quest to find a mate, the quest to look after your young, the quest to find food, all of those dramas, those exciting things that we engage with, they happen in the lives of these tiny creatures as well. And so but the other good thing about that is because there are so many species, we're never going to run out of these really fascinating stories to tell.
It's so interesting because we don't think of that in that way. We don't think of insects in that way a lot of times.
Mm,
We just think of them as more of a nuisance or an annoyance. But
exactly,
to
yeah.
think
Yeah.
of them having the same sorts of pursuits that we do on an everyday basis almost changes the interaction with them, or it should.
Yeah, it really does. And we're right on the cusp of knowledge when it comes to insects. Again, to dip back into my kind of scientific insect world, there is so much research that is coming out and that's come out over the past few years that is making us think, we normally see insects as these very benign objects, almost like little robots, that stereotypical moth to a flame that's
Mm.
not kind of thinking and not experiencing the world in a kind of 3D space or experiencing the world in any way the same as the way that a human would experience the world, just kind of flying towards a stimulus, flying towards a light bulb and banging its head against the window. But there's more and more research coming out that is suggesting at least that insects might feel pain. And I hesitate to use the word consciousness because it's a very, very complex and difficult definition. That getting into thinking about consciousness, but they're much more sentient than we once thought. And I predict over the next few years that we're going to reach a tipping point where we realize that bugs are not just benign individuals; they really are kind of thinking bugs in a way that we never imagined.
That's really interesting because we think of it as instinct.
Mm,
Uh, but you're talking about, again, hesitate to use the consciousnness, but certainly awareness of
absolutely.
decisions in that, which is fascinating. That's a
Yeah.
fascinating thing to think about.
And potentially even, I mean, again, the tricky thing is that most of those definitions, the definition of consciousness and the definition of intelligence, are all based upon a human experience. But
Mm.
there are so many bits of evidence now that are suggesting that, oh, hang on, even based on that human idea of intelligence, the bugs are doing things that kind of fit within that category now. And so yeah, it's a really interesting time to be thinking about insects and bugs more generally.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things too about this series, going back to the series for a minute, that I think is so fascinating, there's a heavy emphasis on relationships.
Mm.
And I don't, excuse me, I don't just mean relationships between bugs. I mean relationships with their environment, relationships with humankind. Could you talk a little bit about that? Because certainly one of the things that comes to light in this series is one definitely seems to affect the other, and we don't think of it in that terms.
Yeah, absolutely. And so there are these things that as scientists we call ecosystem services. And those are the things that the world's ecosystems can provide, the services that they can provide to humans. And bugs are really at the top of the list when it comes to providing services to humans. So, again, like you say, people sometimes think of bugs as just being the kind of, the pesky mosquito that bite you or the things that annoy you, or the pests that sometimes live in our houses. But on the flip side of that is the pollination service that insects provide. And it's something like 60% of all of the kind of all of the food crops on the planet are pollinated by insects. It's difficult to pin down a definition because it's so big and so complicated. But it's huge numbers of the of fruit that we eat, for example, are pollinated by insects, and without that pollination, we wouldn't have them. But there's also things like decomposition or pest control. So most of the pests in agricultural systems around the world are actually controlled by other animals, and quite often they're insects. And so they provide these services for us. So they have a big positive impact on our lives more generally. the flip side of that, of course, is that humans are having this massive negative effect on ecosystems of all types around the planet. We know that we're in the middle of now a climate crisis, but also a biodiversity crisis. So we're using pesticides all the time that are completely knocking out insect populations. We're destroying habitats. We're fragmenting habitats. We've got the effects of climate change, and so bugs, they're the canaries in the coal mine. And there are lots of bits of research that have come out over the past decade that are showing that things are really, really struggling. And if the bugs are struggling, well, we need to worry because they're, as I say, they're the most common, most diverse, most ubiquitous thing in all of our terrestrial ecosystems. So yeah, there are interactions, positive and negative, in all sorts of directions.
Absolutely, absolutely. This is now the show in its second season, and I know I think there's 6 episodes in the in both seasons. There's a few more insects in the world than can be covered in that amount of time.
Yeah.
Um, I was wondering from you, is there anything that you'd be particularly excited to explore in future seasons?
Oh, guys, such a difficult question because the world really is your oyster, and I think we've made quite difficult decisions within this kind of film. We're really trying to make a film for a new kind of audience. A film that works for people that might not be. If you go back several decades, your typical audience for a natural history documentary would be much more of there'd be much more of a kind of stuffy academic feel to them. You'd feel like you're watching a lecture quite often. And so we want to do things, and it's what I think that we've done is to be able to tell those stories, proper scientifically accurate stories, but in a way that's open to anyone. It's open to kids and families and just everybody because they're exciting stories. And so there are lots of complex decisions to make, how to fit all of those different characters together and how to choose characters. But yeah, there are so many more to choose from. In rainforest, for example, we barely scratch the surface of what you can find. You can walk around for half an hour in a rainforest and find species that have never even been seen before. I've discovered new species in rainforest, and I have a new species named after me, in a rainforest. And when I tell people that, they're like, "Amazing! Yeah, wow, that's fantastic! You've discovered a new species." But actually, it's really, really easy. If you go into a rainforest and swish a net around, most of the stuff that you find in that net is probably going to be completely new to science. And so yeah, there are so many more things that we could explore.
And what I'm hearing is that if we want to make a name for ourselves, just walk 10 minutes in the rainforest and you'll just be remembered. Is that?
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, my name is, I have a species of wasp named after me, a tiny, tiny parasitoid wasp. It's about a third of a millimeter long. It's called Megaphragma cockerilli, and it's one of the smallest animals on the planet. So if you're prepared to look at the small stuff in the right place, you'll definitely find some new bits. I'm sure
I
there's,
love
I'm
that.
sure there's a Steve Norton waiting to be discovered out there somewhere.
With my luck, it would be some sort of parasite. No, honestly, I say this genuinely. I love this. I love the series. My kids love the series, and I think it fits. You're talking about the way that nature documentaries used to be shown. I remember watching it
Mm.
with my grandfather and just being bored to tears. But you bring this show to life, and I really we all think it's just a joy. So thank you so much for the time. I really do appreciate it.
Oh, well, thank you. It's great to hear that. And I should make sure I don't take credit for making the program as well. I was just advised on the bugs and helped out in the field, and helped with advising people on how to film the behavior and things. But we've got this, of course, an incredible team at Disney and Nat Geo and Plimsoll Productions who produced it. This incredible filmmakers that are the experts in telling these stories. So yeah, I'll thank them on your behalf. Absolutely.
Please do. Have a great day too. Honestly, thank you so much for the time.
Thanks, Steve. It's been great to talk to you.